that if you can create those sort of relational bonds with your cast members, that'll help with the call-ins, that'll help with productivity, that'll help with everything.
Welcome to the Cleaning Up Podcast, Millionaire Secrets of the Home Services Industry, brought to you by me, Ron Holt, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, America's fastest growing cleaning company. I get a chance to sit down with home service industry pros and other entrepreneurial leaders so they can share their stories, their insight, their experiences. It's so much fun. You're going to learn so much. And you're going to be inspired to take your small business into a national brand just like I did. Today, we have someone from the Walt Disney Corporation. His name is Pete Blank. Pete is a Florida Gator. We're going to just jump right out and say that, and get that out of the way.
Thank you.
But more importantly, spent 13 plus years working in Orlando and has done everything from, work at the gates to really high level positions where he worked with people from an employee experience perspective and a customer experience perspective. And he's here today to talk to us about that experience at Disney and what he's learned from that and how he can help organizations like Two Maids and a Mop improve their experience as well. So welcome, Pete, to our podcast here.
Ron, I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's go ahead and get this story out of the way, because I know anytime you say the word Disney,
right,
people are enamored, right? People just want to know, what was it like? So what was it like working with Mouse?
Well, it was a great experience. And I always start with a caveat that it's not for everybody. I mean, not every company is perfect and every company has their flaws and, their underbelly. But as a generalization, it is a fantastic place to work. It's everything I thought it would be. And I grew up in Florida. So growing up in Florida, we lived like an hour and a half away. So, every single twice a year, I should say, we'd go over to Disney. So I was the kid who was always like, I'm going to work here one day, because just the whole idea that you could get paid for making people happy, like that's a job where okay, so all I've got to do is smile and wave and do this and get paid. I thought it was just the neatest thing. So there were so many great lessons. It was 13 fantastic years. I raised my kids down there. So from ages kindergarten through about 5th grade, before we moved back to Birmingham, Alabama, where I live now, we got to visit the parks constantly. So I think that was worse for my kids when we moved back to Birmingham, because I would say, what kind of friends are you going to miss the most? You're going to miss your teachers? You're going to miss all your friends at church? They're like, no, we're going to miss going to Disney every weekend, all that stuff. So
you probably had the fast pass to the front of the line too, right?
Oh, sure. Oh, and that would always make them so happy. Like if there was one of my friends who I knew who worked at an attraction or something, and I would see them, and so they would give me the wink and the nod and say, come around this way. And boy, your kids think you're the bee's knees when you can backdoor them onto a Disney attraction. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So how many dilly bars did you have while you were there? Is it just like nonstop ice cream, or is it?
Great question. I was more, this is going to take some people back. I was more of an it's a kadoozy kind of guy. Have you ever heard of an it's a kadoozy?
I haven't. I can't wait to hear that.
It's a super long popsicle, and it's probably about a foot long, and I think they were like $3 or $4. And this popsicle was almost in a long cylinder shape and had a bunch of flavors to it. They called it an it's a kadoozy, and it was great. But yeah, all that stuff, all the Mickey bars, all the popcorn, all that stuff. Yeah, and that's how Disney gets the cast members too. Sure, come into the park for free because they know that you're going to be dropping $20, $30, $40 in snacks and food and beverage and all that while you're there as well.
Well, over the years here at Two Maids and a Mop, we've had speakers come in and talk to us about their experience at Disney. We've had consultants pitch us on what they can do to help us. And along the way, I've just met people that have worked for Disney, but 100% of the time when they introduce themselves and they say, and they talk about their time, you could see this twinkle in their eye. There's this admiration, this pride of saying, I worked for Walt Disney at one point.
Yes.
And I think that every organization wants to figure out a way to foster that type of, pride in their own employees, but it's rare that you see that anywhere else but Disney. So let's jump right into the magic. How does that magic occur for an employee to feel different about their experience at Disney versus everywhere else in the world?
Sure. Well, it's definitely a twofold process, Ron. The first side of it is the employee has to want to be there. Believe it or not, Disney is, I don't want to say it's kind of like a calling, but what I put it in the same category as nursing, public safety, social work. These are careers and fields that people go into knowing that they may never make six figures, that they may never, be able to afford all these great luxuries, but they know that they're doing something for the greater good. So a majority of the people who work at Disney are there because they buy in to the idea, like I said, that, your primary job, no matter if you're, a entertainment cast member or a food and beverage cast member or front of the house, back of the house, whatever it is, everybody's buying into the idea that our job is to create happiness for people who come down here. So step one, is sort of the intrinsic motivation there. The second part is the hiring process. And again, Disney does a pretty good job, and you can imagine the turnover. It's just like any hospitality industry. You're going to have fairly high turnover, but we do try to get the right people in the right job so that they can be successful and not be bored and not say, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be." So again, training the recruiters and training the interviewers and training the HR staff to make sure that if someone is extroverted or if they're introverted or what's the culture of this department or, trying to match their strengths with where they want to be, because believe it or not, Ron, there's some people who work at Disney who don't like it, but they just stay there, but they're just not, they're just not happy. And most of the time it's because they're in a wrong fit role. It really has nothing to do with their output. It's just that, if you're not an extrovert, can you imagine being on stage 8 hours a day, waving, smiling, happy? We want you to go out and make small talk. Well, extroverts are like, perfect, let's do that. If you have a preference towards introversion, we need to find you a better role at Disney where you can shine instead of just being in front of, the guest all day.
Right. Well, you wrote a book recently, or it's coming out soon, called 55 Ways to Add Disney Magic to Your Organization. And we're not going to go through each of those 55.
Number one, yeah. Number two, number three.
And plus, they need to buy the book, right?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
But I would like to kind of talk about a few of those because they're really interesting to me. The book, I had an opportunity to preview that recently, and it's a phenomenal book. So congratulations on it. It's
thanks.
Any organization can work for it. What's so cool about Pete's story, by the way, guys, Pete has used his Disney experience to work in the most un-Disney occupation ever. He works in public service of all things.
Local government, my friend. Let's take some Disney magic to local government here in Alabama, and that's what I've been trying to do, and we've made some pretty good inroads with that here in Jefferson County, Alabama. But you're right. At first glance, the two don't seem to mesh, but we are doing our best.
If you fix the DMV and make it Disney-like,
not my area, but yes, they could use a little bit of Disney magic. No doubt.
Well, let's get back to this great book. So there's, again, 55 ways to just add this powerful magic to an organization. And some of these things are really, really eye-opening to me and just fun to kind of think about. And again, it relates to bigger things than just two maids and a mop. This could work for, like in your case, a county government. But We'll talk about the employee side of the equation right now, because everybody wants to go to the fun stuff, all the stuff that you see in the park that makes you smile and all the memories that's created by that. But none of that happens without a tremendous amount of employee engagement, which in our world, I like to kind of call it an employee experience. And so, what do we do? You talked a little bit about the recruiting and finding the right people and putting them in the right places. But how do we hear that and then go and make process out of that? It's everyone agrees with what you just said, but how do we actually go out there and make that happen? What are some things you learned while you're at Disney?
Well, a couple things kind of tie into that. And again, my answers today, Ron, might be a little different than they were a couple years ago, because we're in very interesting times right now when it comes to just what's happening in the United States, if not around the world. So it's so funny, if we were doing this 6 months ago when the economy was humming and unemployment was low and there were no jobs available and people were just happy, everything's working and stock markets, everything's doing great. It's very easy to be engaged. We are about to enter a do more with less mentality, not just at Disney, but probably everywhere, and especially in local government, is something we're going to have to attack. So when you have these employees, we can't just stand back and say, hey, be lucky you have a job. Hey, there's people being furloughed right now. Hey, my wife just got a 10% pay cut. At least we're not doing that. Hey, and believe it or not, I run into supervisors and managers and even some small business owners who think that's the motivation that employees need. Oh, they're just happy they have a job right now because everything may not be going. I'm like, well, no. If there's ever a time to even engage more, it's now, because you might be asking more of your employees today than ever before. So a couple of things that Disney instilled in me was they created what were called Disney cast member expectations. And what they did was they went out and surveyed their employee base. They went out and surveyed their cast members. This wasn't created through human resources. This wasn't created through, some type of top-down initiative. They said, hey, employees, how do you want to be treated at Disney on a regular basis? And they listed like 20 things and put them together and came out with what were called the forecast expectations. And I wish I had them in front of me right now, but they had things to do like, treat me like an individual, respect me, listen to my opinions. And I think there was a fourth one, but the whole idea behind it is leadership bought in, because leadership now knows this is what the employee base sort of agreed on as to what are the minimum, not engaging above and beyond, but what are the minimum expectations that the cast members expect from me? Because most of the time we flip it, Ron. Most of the time I always go out and coach, hey, managers and leaders, make sure you're out there letting your employees know what you expect from them. That's a way to increase engagement, because then they'll know. The flip side is also true. What do the employees expect out of their CEO, out of their franchisee, out of their management team? What are the basics that employees expect? And I really learned that a lot at Disney, because that was important. I never would have thought about that. I would have thought about the managers driving the culture, the managers driving the train, the managers driving the business. And as long as the employees know what's expected, they'll be happy. I think we need to flip that on its head, like I learned at Disney, and say, what do the employees expect? Now, there's always a danger in that, Ron, when they come back and say, we want a pool table. And what would motivate us is a 20% raise and free coffee and all. I'm not talking about little tangible things like that. I'm talking about culture stuff. We're talking about what are treat me like an individual, respect my opinion, ask me about my kids. What are some of the things that employees want their leaders to do? I think that's something I really took away.
Yeah, in a way, it almost feels like Walt Disney, the man, has always been regarded as sort of an icon, when it comes to entertainment or whatever. He's just a business legend,
right?
And he's fair enough, but he almost feels like he was a man before his time, because when he was building this from the ground up, this idea of culture or employee engagement or even listening to an employee was not really something that people thought was how you do business. It was very much almost like a drill sergeant. You do this because I'm paying you,
Right.
And so I can still remember those lectures from my father, growing up. I'm 46 years old, and as a kid, and he, when I said, well, why don't I have to do that? It's because I told you to, son.
Yeah,
and
right.
So it's sort of it feels that way in a lot of organizations. Well, do this. Why? Because I told you so. But Walt Disney wanted you to know why you were doing that, and that there was a bigger purpose to that besides just picking up a piece of garbage.
Man, you hit the key point there, and that's something that we learn from our kids is the word why. We encourage, and I say we, I don't work there anymore. It's been a few years, but I still have the chip in my neck. They don't let you take it out when you leave. But we used to always encourage why, because when the employees know the why behind a decision, they're much more ready, if you will, to adapt to that decision and to own that decision and to accept that decision. So again, a lot of times the why, because I said so, because I'm higher ranking than you, because I'm in charge, I mean, you can run a business that way, or maybe I should qualify, you can try to run a business that way, but people are always going to want to know the why behind the decisions. Now, where I currently work, here's a perfect example. We've been going back and forth between remote work and work in the office. So, when the pandemic first hit, we're all remote. So our 60-person organization goes remote. Well, about probably a month ago, Ron, the numbers were getting a little bit better, and we said, hey, let's all start going back to work, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, kind of a half and half. Well, the big question was why? Well, why do we have to come back? If the numbers are still kind of high and all that, what's the value? And no one saw the value. So finally, we had to tell our team, it's a branding issue. That's the only reason behind it. Yes, you can work just as well at home as you can at work. And yes, we believe in work-life balance. But our clients and our customers will respond better to us knowing that we're open and in the office than assuming that, oh, your whole team is remote. You must not be doing anything. It's not a lack of trust. The main why was it's a branding thing. We want our agencies to know we're still here for you. And once I told them that, they're like, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess I can see that. But if we just didn't tell them the why, then they don't buy into that. So yeah, you're right. The why for the employee experience is so important.
That's cool. So I want to hit on one more thing before we move on to something else. One of the chapters in your book talks about employee engagement is to act like a leader at all times. And I love that. And it feels, who doesn't? Who doesn't understand that and agree with that? Everyone agrees with that. But I've always felt like, even in those early days of Two Maids and a Mop's early days, when we had me, myself, and 250 square feet of space, that even though nobody was literally watching me, I was alone in my office, I always felt like someone was watching me. And now today we're much bigger, and there is someone sometimes watching me because we've got a few people in the office now. But I've always had this mentality that no matter what I'm doing as a leader, it's my job to assume that lots of people are watching me. And sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But it sounds like that's also something that was pretty prevalent inside the Disney culture as well.
Oh, very important at Disney. Yeah, I've got many stories. And this happened. Disney does a lot of internal promotion, especially in the theme parks and resort side. So if you do a really good job as a frontline hourly cast member, chances are good you're going to get promoted into management. And that's always hard to go from that whole buddy to boss thing. Now you're leading people. So the whole idea of just people are always watching. In fact, people always ask me for like interview advice and all that kind of stuff. And I always tell them, the 10-minute sit-down formal interview you get means nothing. I said, your interview is the 3 years people have been watching you prior to this interview. Because anybody can go in for 10 minutes and go, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'll be ethical, and I'm going to be a cast-focused manager. But if they've been working with you for the past 2 years and have seen you not be acting that way, why would you turn it on now? So the whole act like a leader at all times, no matter what role you have, you're interviewing with your behaviors every day for the next role. That's part of the reason why you always have to be acting like a leader. And like you said, people are always watching all the time.
Right. Now, is this serious? At Disney, the job of the boss was to get the employee to love their job, and not only love their job, but to love the boss. Is that real?
Well, no, that just came out of, this is what I found from an employee experience perspective from working at Disney. There are different reasons people love working for Disney. And so I kind of had these 4 different quadrants that I think, number one is just to kind of love your job. And so that means the tasks associated with your job. So for example, if you like driving monorails, if you like driving the Jungle Cruise boats, if you like cleaning hotel rooms, that means you just love your job, because that's the mundane over and over stuff. So some people never want to get into management. They're like, why would I want to get into management? I get to drive the monorails all day. And once I get promoted into management, I can't drive. So, we try to put a right fit role. Some people, like the daily tasks. And then some people love the Disney organization. And I talk about that. They don't care where they work at Disney. They just want to tell people, like you said when we started this podcast, they like to get on an airplane or go to their churches or tell their friends, hey, where do you work? Oh, I work for Disney. Because most people will go, oh, tell me Tell me about that. That's why our college internship program, which was recently put on a hiatus because of COVID-19, but that's why the college internships are so successful. That's where I worked also for 3 years while I was at Disney, Ron, and I can't tell you the number of students who would call me back or email me and say, "Hey, Pete, I want to tell you something. I had a 4.0 GPA at, whatever, Cal State, Fullerton, or University of Tennessee, or
Georgia.
wherever.
Yeah.
I doubt they had a 4.0 at Georgia, please. They just give away A's out there. Anyhow, so Georgia, and I have 3 internships, one at, some huge accounting firm that's well known, and one at some other location. And I worked the popcorn stand at Disney in the Magic Kingdom for 6 months. And guess what every interviewer wants to ask me about? I said, Disney. They want to ask about Disney. And how did I like scooping popcorn? And what did I get to see? And what was backstage? And what did I learn? And what lessons did I take away? So they're like, even that internship of just working in a theme park for 5 months to so many people has value. So that's why some people love the Disney organization, because they know that the name is going to lead to that. But anyhow, as I ramble into my last point here about love your boss, Disney tries to make sure that they know how important the manager-employee relationship is. I mean, when I was there, Ron, there were 60,000 people working there at one time. There's been over 75,000 people working there. There are a lot of good managers, and there's a lot of bad managers. They try to train their managers and leaders the best they can to understand that the personal relationship they have with their employees, asking about their kids and how can I give you work-life balance and what do you need? And, that guest was just yelling at you for 30 minutes about something you had no control over. Let me listen to you and let you vent and go back out. Not like, that's just part of your job, suck it up, buttercup. So the whole idea of love your boss is just reminding the leadership team that if you can create those sort of relational bonds with your cast members, that'll help with the call-ins, that'll help with productivity, that'll help with everything.
Well, so over the last...
And by the way, Ron, I tend to ramble, buddy, so if you need to cut me off at any time, let me...
That's the whole... Let me know. That's the whole point of podcasting, one big professional ramble.
You are correct about that.
So over the last several weeks here at Two Maids and a Mop and on this podcast, we've been talking about customer experience, and it hit us pretty quickly during that transition, that discussion, that we needed to talk about employee experience. But man, it is so fun to talk about customer experience.
Yes.
At least for me, it is, because that's the end result. That's what that's the goal, that you're always chasing. And so there's a ton of stuff inside this great book of yours where you talk about customer experience. But everybody's got a Disney story, right? So I'm going to tell my Disney story.
Yeah.
And it's probably not as big as some others. I didn't get to go and be on the stage, and I didn't become, Prince Charming or anything one day.
Right.
But this happened a couple of years ago. We have 2 young kids, and we took the kids down, and my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, said, "Hey, we've got this old ticket. It's like a black and white perforated Disney ticket from the early 80s that we never used, and it says there's no expiration, so see what happens." So we go down, and sure enough, they look at it. They didn't bat an eye. Within minutes, they were like, "All right, come on in. You're good to go." And this ticket was purchased in the early 80s. It's just crazy. And how many times do you have these gift cards that people give you around Christmas time that have the 6-month expiration that you can't use, and you just lose the entire value behind it? And Disney has a no expiration date that dates back, in this case, 30 plus years. It's the craziest thing. And I couldn't believe it. And it made the rest of the day perfect, because they went above and beyond there. They didn't have to. We would not have been upset. Nobody would have said, "How dare you?" But they did it, and I'm sure there were some imperfections. It was hot. There were a million people there. There were some long lines. There was a lot of imperfect moments. But that first moment, that welcome, really, really changed the rest of the day for us and made us smile, even when there were imperfections. So I guess my point is, beyond just the story itself, is, you actually talk about it in your book about how to create that initial welcome for a customer. Disney does a great job with that. How can other organizations like Two Maids and a Mop create that same type of welcome?
Well, let me give you a couple answers on that. First is just to talk about your example for a second. That's the beauty of cast member empowerment. And again, sometimes empowering your employees can come back to bite you because they may do something wrong. But that's when you do coaching and feedback and you don't put all these policies. I mean, Disney could put a policy in place that says, all right, tickets that were issued from 71 through 75, 40% return rate. If they've got A through E tickets, you're going to refund 62.7%. Take the year, divide by 3. Can you see the ticket? Does it have a barcode on? I mean, they could put all of this stuff in place. And what a lot of times they'll tell you is to use your best judgment. Now, Disney's changed their ticket policies recently. I think a lot of tickets they sell now have 14-day expiration dates on them from the date of first use because it's kind of a business strategy now. But let me give you another example. At Trader Joe's, a friend of mine, Brian, recently had a great experience there as far as the welcome goes. He went into Trader Joe's. He wanted to return some steaks. He got some steaks that had kind of looked bad over a couple days. And the coolest thing happened, Ron, instead of them telling him, well, go stand in that line, go talk to customer service, fill out your receipt, the employee who was standing there to welcome him said, I can take care of that for you. Follow me. Walked him back to the meat case, got him a couple of new steaks to replace the ones that he had, and sent him on his way and said, thanks for coming in. And again, by having people ready for the part of being of welcoming you, they can not just welcome you, but maybe they can eliminate some issues. Maybe they can cut something off at the pass. Maybe they can start a small problem from becoming a big problem. So the welcome stuff is very, very important.
I totally agree. So Pete, another thing that I thought was really cool about, this book and talking about customer experience is, we talk about employees at Disney as cast members. And
yes,
whether you're called a team member or a staff member or whatever, there's all sorts of different ways to name an employee. That one name is stuck with the Disney organization and hasn't really transcended in any other business as far as I know of. And beyond the obvious, beyond the naming of the job title, how can we create a customer experience led by employees for those employees to really think outside the box? I can think of two things right out of the gate. One, that ticket agent I just talked about, that might not have been her job that day, but she made it happen. And then I've also heard these really cool stories about everyone at the Disney parks, whether you're the CEO to the janitor. When you walk on the property, then your job is to clean that property. And
yes,
there's always something beside. You may be headed to a very important meeting. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on, but as you're going to that very important meeting, if there's a piece of paper on the ground, it's your job to pick that up. And so how do you get an employee to always think about customer experience beyond the actual right in front of you job tasks? In our case, we clean houses, and we know our job's to clean a house. But how do we get an employee to think about things other than cleaning that house?
Couple things. First of all, during the new hire orientation for everybody, you set up your non-negotiables up front. So the example you gave about everybody picking up trash, everybody, no matter what level you're at the Disney organization, has to go through a traditions, which is a day or day and a half orientation program. And the cool thing about that is you can have a custodial cast member sitting there with a frontline manager who just got hired, sitting there with a finance person, sitting at a table with a new vice president of marketing. And everybody is told on day one, this is your role. So those things aren't ever segmented out. Everybody buys in to that your role is to pick up trash and keep the property as beautiful as it can. And the beauty about that is, and you've probably seen this, you'll see some of our guests at Disney do the same thing. You'll see guests walk around that see other people who have actually left stuff behind, and they'll pick it up and throw it out because they consider the park to be part of their experience. But the other thing that's important, and this is a word that doesn't get used in corporate America a lot, but Disney uses it because it's the entertainment company. It's kind of like you said, it's a show. It's a show. And so when you think about, as you're listening to this podcast, whether you're a franchisee of Two Maids and a Mop or of a fast food restaurant or of an oil change business, or whether you work in the healthcare industry, whether you work in banking, we need to start thinking about, especially in today's day and age of what I call the economics of aesthetics, start thinking about the show element of your organization, because people are looking for that. It's no longer enough just to say, oh, we have the best steaks. People don't want a restaurant with just the best steaks. They also want, what does the background music sound like? What does it smell like? Is the parking lot clean? Am I going to get a survey afterwards? Are there going to be costumes? Are there going to be, people want to know the whole experience that comes with that. So again, going back to your business a little bit, yes, I want a clean house, but what else do they want? What else attributes to the show? How does it smell when they leave? And what does it look like? And what do your marketing materials look like that you leave behind? And do you create a Two Maids and a Mop Alexa channel so that when people finish cleaning your homes, they can say, Alexa, play Two Maids and a Mop, and it's this constant music in the background with someone's voice going, thank you for using Two Maids and a Mop. And so when they come home from work and it's clean, that's playing in the back. I just made that up top of my head. I have no idea if that's feasible or not. But I mean, that's the kind of
I just wrote it down, so we're good.
I mean, that's the kind of experience people are looking for. We're about to go where I work in local government. We do all of our leadership training, Ron, in person. It's all going to be in-person training. Everybody comes to our location. We do training on management skills and coaching skills and feedback skills and all that stuff. And we're going to all virtual because we can't have any meetings. Well, here's the key. I'm training with all of my team members, and we're going through this. We're no longer delivering virtual training. We're going to deliver a virtual experience. That's part of the culture shift that they have to understand, because if they just go and try and just talk, you've been to some boring training classes online where people are talking. People are going to want in a training an experience. They're going to want a show. They're going to want to be entertained as well as learning. And I think that a lot of organizations may be missing that boat. And so Disney does that well because they live in the entertainment bubble and segment, and people buy into that. But it can work in banking, it can work in insurance, it can work in healthcare, as long as you get the foundations in place.
All right, so just a couple of other questions for you. So I've always thought, Disney, everybody thinks so highly of Disney. Everyone's got their story, everyone's been there, can remember all the fun memories.
Right.
And I look back on its growth, and I've always wondered, how much of this was because right place, right time. There was sort of a void for that type of entertainment, family entertainment option. And then, this large piece of real estate in Central Florida that doesn't exist any longer. There's no such, unless you're in Montana, maybe, And
right.
So was there a form of almost fortunate luck involved? Or maybe a better question is, if Walt Disney were alive today, and he were to create another Disney in Montana, could he pull it off? Could he do that all over again using these principles that you're talking about in this podcast?
I think so. And, it's a combination of luck, timing, but Walt doesn't get enough. There's so many books written about Walt, but he was an incredibly creative, innovative man. And the other person who doesn't get enough ups, if you will, is his brother Roy, because Roy was the financial side of the business. Roy had to keep him in check. Walt would have gone bankrupt more times than he did if it wasn't for Roy. So balancing that need for creativity and innovation with the business savvy of not growing too big too fast. Like you said, Disneyland started in 1955 with the whole point being that Walt wanted to go somewhere with his kids and with a family that didn't feel dirty. It didn't feel yucky like all the roadside carnivals and all the fairs did. So he knew that there was a need for that. But then he also knew he had intellectual property in all of his movies that he could bring in together. Well, when he wanted to open Walt Disney World, his design was not. When Walt Disney World opened, it was really not what he wanted. He passed away a few years before it opened. His idea was the Magic Kingdom theme park would be just 1/100th of all the awesome things and the futuristic cities and the technology that would happen out there. And again, going back to your thing of timing, because he passed away, he wasn't able to see it the way that he wanted it. But in fact, and this people always laugh when I tell them this, the original marketing caption for Walt Disney World was the vacation kingdom of the world. It was designed to be a vacation kingdom of the world. So if you took a week and went to Walt Disney World, you might spend one day at the Magic Kingdom and one day playing tennis and one day on a golf course and one day hanging out at the campgrounds and maybe one day on the boats and one day relaxing by your pool and all that. Can you imagine going to Disney now with your kids and saying, hey, we're going to go to Disney and play tennis, and then we're going to play golf. But when are we going to the theme parks? Oh, we're not. We're not. We're just going to rest and relax. Disney vacations have become far cry from from resting,
Absolutely.
from resting and relaxing. But to kind of circle back to answer your question, I think he'd be pleased where the company is now. People always talk, what would Walt do? He wouldn't like the way it's going. Don't forget, everything he did pushed the envelope. Everything he did was a little bit different. So there's a lot of decisions Disney makes these days that are pushing the envelope and looking a little different, but that's part of creativity and innovation. And if you run a franchise, if you have your own business, you have to be creative and innovative. You can't just rest on your laurels. What can you do that's above and beyond and sort of push that envelope a little bit beyond where you think might be the end result?
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
So go back over those 13 years you were at Walt Disney, and I just told you my Disney story. What's the best Disney story that you can remember from your time on the grounds there?
There's so many. I've got so many of when I went as a guest that I experienced it just by being there as a guest. There's so many great lessons I learned. I've had more guests yell at me from working in the hotels and theme parks than I could tell you a million stories about that. But let me tell you my leadership story, because this is the one that really stuck with me. I had a great front office manager when I worked at Port Orleans Resort. And one of the key lessons she always taught me when I sat down one day and talked about how I wanted to move ahead and I wanted to get promoted and I wanted to be a general manager, I wanted to work my way off the ranks. She said, Pete, you're only successful if you make the people around you successful. And that shifted the whole way that I looked at leadership, because what her point was, if I've got 5 direct reports working for me, and all of them get promoted and all of them go on to bigger or better things, or all of them transfer out to get more money or whatever, people are going to look at me and say, man, you're doing something right. The fact that you're developing your people. And that really shifted for me of all this. That really changed the way that I led at Disney, because I did start there with a how high can I climb mentality. And halfway through, I figured out, how can I help other people succeed? And again, in your world, other franchisees, how can I help I don't want my best employee who works for me to leave and buy their own. Sure you do, because that means that they've been successful and you are a people developer. So Disney really does invest in developing its people. And that's one of my favorite stories, because it changed the way that I like to motivate and inspire others.
No, that's a great story.
It's probably not what you were looking for. You were probably looking for, so one day the lights went off at Space Mountain and this guy threw up on me and all. No, we're not going that route. We're going.
We were hoping for have you heard the Disney snow tire story, or not Disney, but the Nordstrom snow tire story?
Where the person, they brought it back and gave him a full refund. Oh, I mean, I tell the story all the time about the gentleman who came up when I worked at a resort that was called Dixie Landing. At the time, he had a light bulb in his hand. And he had a light bulb in his hand and said, because this light bulb is out in his room, he would like free breakfast for his entire family, because now the room did not meet Disney standards. And he literally unscrewed the light bulb and brought it with him. So, of course, we gave him his free breakfast. We fixed his light bulb. And again, don't be unscrewing your light bulbs, people, and taking them up to your hotel front desks, but all kinds of stuff like that. But that's a key leadership lesson that I learned at Disney, and I think I mentioned it very quickly earlier. In some companies, we make all these processes, Ron, because there's 2% of the people or 3% of our customers are going to beat the system. They're going to try and game the system. They're going to try and get something for nothing. And so we design all these policies and procedures that make the other 96% who are good, honest people go, why do we have to do it that way? How come we've got to do double checks and triple checks and sign here? Why can't you just trust me? Well, because 2 years ago, someone came in and got us. Who are 3% that are going to get you and are going to game the system are going to do it? Build that into your budget, your processes, and stop putting all this stuff in place that makes the 97% honest people get mad at you because you've got to protect yourself from the idiots. I mean, I learned that a lot too.
I love it. That's a great way to end here. So Pete, like I said, when we first started this interview, you say the word Disney, people's ears perk up. They want to hear the stories, So I love talking to you here, and hopefully we can talk more as we continue to grow. I mean, it just so happens that you're in our hometown in Birmingham, Alabama. And so hopefully this is a long relationship. But thank you for your time today. For everyone out there that wants to get a copy of this book that's coming out here soon, or just wants to reach out and work and talk with you, feel free to share some contact information here with them.
Sure. Everything you want to know about me is on my website. It's at peteblank.com, peteblank.com. There's links to some of my books. There's videos. There's articles. I do a weekly television cast. I do a podcast. I do a video series. And the book will be on Amazon probably very soon. You can get. Disney does what's called a soft opening runs, where like they will open up an attraction but not tell anybody. So you're like, oh, I can't believe that. Same thing with this book. This is not the best time to be launching a book, to be going, hey, everybody, look what I've got, when they're like, we don't have a job. How dare you? So this is a very soft opening for this book. It's on Amazon if you want to get it. It's got a lot of action tips in it, and we're going to be rolling it out, ramping it up probably in a few months. But peteblank.com, follow me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to connect with me.
Well, Pete, I'll make sure to get a few of those copies, and we'll distribute those among our franchise owners. They'll love to read it, and I know I enjoyed reading it myself. So, thanks for your time today, and I look forward to talking with you again down the road.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it, buddy.
You bet.
Kyle Davis here from Business Development. Thank you so much for listening to the Cleaning Up Podcast. If you found this episode valuable, then please subscribe on your favorite listening platform, and please share it with your friends. If you're ever interested in going into business for yourself and purchasing a franchise, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can get a hold of me at phone number 205-870-8643, email KyleD@ineedamade.com, or visit us online at twomadesfranchise.com to learn more.